What's up, YouTube? Today we'll be looking at the LAIC 2025 Championship Series Cup once again, and the team we're taking a look at today is HISUIAN, ZOROARK, and Turtonator. Now the main focus of today's video is going to be HISUIAN ZOROARK because it was actually banned at the beginning of this cup, even though it shouldn't have been. It is a ghost normal type Pokemon, so it does get in off that ghost typing, and it has a really cool moveset and typing for this meta, only having one weakness, which is a weakness to dark, which is not an allowed typing. That said, we've got Glalie, the non-shadow, on the lead. I've got the rank 4 non-shadow Glalie, the rank 4, non-shadow Glalie. So this thing puts in some incredible work, and you're going to see that. The HISUIAN ZOROARK on the safe switch, and then Turtonator in the back running Ember, and I'll do another video on that later. But as you can see here on the right, one Shadow Claw advantage HISUIAN ZOROARK is absolutely absurd against this meta. It is such a neutral Pokemon, and it is so strong. So without further ado, let's hop into these battles. Heading into the first match, we've got Glalie into a Claydol. So this is actually kind of an awkward lead because rollout is resisted. However, my opponent makes that switch very easily for me because they come in with a Bronzong. Now, Bronzong will be met with the ZOROARK here. You could argue I probably should have come the Turtonator here. Turtonator probably would have been the better option as I can live a Psyshock. Ember and Brutal Swing are all super effective, but I kind of felt like this was a bait out. So I end up throwing the foul play on the CMB tie, and now I will have to commit 2 shields in this matchup because if you're not familiar with HISUIAN ZOROARK, it is immensely glassy. It is one of the glassiest Pokemon in the entire game, with like a 1300 overall stat product. That said, in comes an Oranguru in the back, but Oranguru will be hit with back-to-back foul plays. This is super effective damage, and it will two-shot the Oranguru unless they commit the shield. They do end up letting that go, so now in comes Glalie. Glalie will be able to outpace the Claydol to an Avalanche. However, the opponent will be able to connect with a super effective Rock Tomb before I get to Avalanche number 2, but instead, my opponent overfarms, allowing me to get to a second Avalanche, and Avalanche from this range does huge super effective damage. The opponent now will look to connect with a Rock Tomb in order to pick up the knockout on the Glalie, but that is okay because I know Turtonator can survive any one charge move, and Brutal Swing is just straight 4. However, why would I want to live it and test it when I can go for the catch onto HISUIAN ZOROARK? ZOROARK easily going to go down here. The opponent fully undercharges that. It still actually doesn't KO, but that is alright because now we have the energy to make it do a Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing will be enough to knock out the Claydol, and we are able to take a Game 1 win. You will notice that I'm on Flamethrower in these matchups. You should run Dragon Claw. I just straight up don't have any charged TMs. But into the next matchup, we've got Mirror Leads Glalie into the Shadow Glalie. So the way I like to play this out is never bait, go straight for the Shadow Ball, because even Glalie can live a Shadow Ball from this range. It is non-stab damage, and even though Shadow Ball is a good move, you can survive that very comfortably. After grabbing a shield, I will pivot into the HISUIAN ZOROARK because I can just match shields with my opponent, and rollout doesn't do all that much damage. So I now have an energy lead into whatever comes in the back. In the back is a Goodra, but now Goodra will be hit with a Shadow Ball. This is stab damage. After 4 Shadow Claws, it leaves them at 1 HP. That is super unfortunate, but that's okay because that should set up the Turtonator for an Ember farm down and getting a nice energy lead. So now in comes Turtonator. Turtonator does get that 1 Ember farm down. What does my opponent have in the back? They have an Oranguru. So having that Ember head start is really nice because I will be able to outpace the opponent to the Brutal Swing. I'd be able to outpace them either way, but we're going to have a bunch of residual energy in this matchup. I end up going for the catch onto my Glalie as they make it to the back-to-back Brutal Swings of their own, but my opponent actually overfarms and fully confusion farm downs my Glalie. So now we are in a bit of a tricky situation. They're at the back-to-back charge moves. I can live a Brutal Swing from this range. It is non-stab damage, and Oranguru kind of hits like a wet noodle, but at this point they are at yet another Brutal Swing. So after going for my own Brutal Swing, I will have to under tap the move, winning the CMB tie. The opponent does not go for that catch, and if they did, all I'd have to do is go for the undercharge, Ember farm down the Glalie, but fortunately we don't even have to consider that because we get to yet another Brutal Swing, and Brutal Swing from this range picks up the knockout on the Glalie, and we are able to take that win. Into the next match, we've got Glalie into Dewgong. So this is a fantastic lead. And as we play this out, I should let you know that if you are still here at this point in the video, I have a very exciting battle later in this video because I made some insane plays back to back, and I'm very excited to get to that battle. That said, the Dugong has resisted Ice Shards in this matchup, and rollouts are super effective, and we pace the exact same way Shadow Ball to Drill Run. So all I have to do is throw on the CMP tie. I will win CMP tie every single time here. Dugong is very bulky, and 2 Shadow Balls are actually enough to pick up the knockout. In comes a Charizard in the back, taking massive super effective damage from the rollouts, as it is double super effective. The opponent does go for the Air Cutter as soon as they get it to knock out the Glalie, but now in comes the HISUIAN ZOROARK. HISUIAN ZOROARK will of course have to respect any one charge move here, as it would do huge damage. And now in the back is a Vespiquen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to farm up 2 back-to-back foul plays and look to chip and bank a charge move here, because now I know I can win CMP against the Charizard as long as I grab that final shield from the opponent. The opponent ends up not even farming up to a power gem, so I call the bait. It is just the X Scissor that allows me to outpace, and this is a matchup where it's actually really nice to have that flamethrower coverage. Flamethrower is super effective. It knocks out the Vespiquen, and now back in comes the Charizard, but Charizard will be outpaced. We make it to the Brutal Swing, and my opponent knows we have the foul play loaded, so they will end up letting that go, and we are able to take that win. In tonight's match, we got Glalie into Vespiquen on the lead this time. So another decent lead, as rollout is super effective. The opponent safe switches into a Dragonair, and I don't have a great response to Dragonair in the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stay in this matchup. Avalanche is super effective damage. The opponent will put up a shield, and now I can just let this go because I can live any one charge move and make it to a second Avalanche. The opponent ends up going for the wrap. That's a little bit more expensive, but it does lower my defense, but it does allow me to outpace to another Avalanche. Avalanche will grab 2 shields from my opponent, and now in comes the Zoroark. Zoroark will of course have to respect any one charge move here, but then I can look to just fire off the foul play to pick up the knockout on the Dragonair. I will throw the charge move right away because I wasn't sure about how much residual energy they had. They end up making a really nice catch onto their Vespiquen and sneaking a Fury Cutter in, which means they're actually going to be able to outpace me by 1 single turn and pick up the knockout with a resisted X Scissor. X Scissor, even though it is resisted, easily knocks out the Zoroark from that range, but now in comes Turtonator. Ember's hitting for super effective damage. The opponent goes for the power gem, but we make the catch onto the Glalie. Power Gem easily will be knocking out the Glade. Now back in comes the Turtonator. Turtonator looking for the full Ember farm down. Can we get it? It's going to be close. They make it to 1 final charge move, but this is only enough for the X Scissor, and X Scissor is resisted, so I will just let that go. And in the back is a Metang, so I'm going to go immediately for the Brutal Swing. My opponent should know that 2 Brutal Swings are not enough to knock out, so they will not have any urgency to go for a catch, but I am running Flamethrower, so once again, Flamethrower kind of coming in clutch in this matchup, picking up the knockout on the Metang. We're already at another Brutal Swing, and Brutal Swing from this range will be enough to pick up the knockout on the Dragonair, and we are able to take that win. Into the next match, we've got Glalie into Shadow Gyarados. So rollouts will hit for super effective damage here, and Avalanche is neutral, so I will just stay in this matchup, knowing that I can survive any one charge move. However, if I want to play the two shield scenario, I can, because rollouts will just do too much damage. But in comes a Dugong, so boy am I glad I shielded that up, because Glalie is going to be putting in so much work in this matchup. They end up matching shields, going for we're going for the shield when I go for the Shadow Ball, then connecting with a Drill Run. I'm going to bank all of that energy and then come in with Turtonator. Turtonator, I know, will be outpaced here to the charge move, but I know 1 Drill Run is not enough to knock out, so I will just let this go. And now I'm going to be constantly over farming in this matchup. And the reason I'm doing this is because our switch timers are misaligned. So if that Gyarados comes back in, they will instantly be met with a Brutal Swing. I'm watching for the catch. The opponent does not go for it, so I throw the Brutal Swing on the CMP tie with my opponent's next charge move, and Brutal Swing from this range picks up the knockout. If that Gyarados comes back in, they're going to be met with a Brutal Swing before they can get that Dragon Breath farm down, and that is absolutely huge because we have a charge move loaded on the Glalie as well, but the opponent lets that go, recognizing that we have the charge move banked. In the back is a Turtonator. I go for a CMP sack swap onto my Glalie onto their Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing is not enough to knock out. We're now going to be able to connect with an Avalanche. Avalanche will hit for massive neutral damage unless the opponent commits the shield. They do end up committing the shield, but now I can look to overfarm in this matchup. They now have enough energy for another Brutal Swing, but now they're 2 off the next. So what that means is I can go for 4 Shadow Claws and the move, farming up to nearly 100 energy. That second Incinerate will not register. This Shadow Ball will be enough to pick up the knockout, and we leave with a foul play loaded for the Gyarados, and we easily win CMP against the Gyarados. Foul play picks up the knockout, and that was the game I was talking about. Boy, was I proud of that one. I played that absolutely perfectly. Into the next match, we've got Glalie into Altaria. So this is a pretty good lead, as Avalanche will hit for massive double super effective damage. The opponent pivots into a Bronzong, but because they pivot late, I'm going to stay in and go for a Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball does grab a shield from my opponent, and now in comes Turtonator. Turtonator, of course, has an abysmal matchup against the Altaria, so it makes sense to come in with the Turtonator here. They end up going for the double Psyshock route instead of the payback. So I can no-shield this, knowing that 2 Psyshocks are not enough to knock out. And I can overfarm in this matchup and look to pick up the knockout with a flamethrower. Metal Sounds are resistant, so they can't quite get the farm done. They end up putting up the shield, and then they come back with the Altaria, but Altaria will be met with a Brutal Swing. This will chip the Altaria, and it'll burn the Switch Clock so that I can come back with the Glalie. However, Altaria does have Flamethrower for coverage, so I will respect it with a shield. They end up baiting with a Sky Attack, but that is okay, because now I can farm up to back-to-back Avalanches. The opponent throws once again, but this can only be enough energy for a Sky Attack, so I will just let this go. Sky Attack is not enough to knock out. Here comes an Avalanche. Avalanche is double super effective. It will pick up the knockout on the Altaria, and in the back is an Oranguru. I actually accidentally saw the Psychic typing, expected a double steel backline, ended up going for the Shadow Ball, which is resisted. However, it does still do some decent chip. I end up throwing 4 Shadow Claws, catching onto my Turtonator as they make it to the back-to-back charge moves. Brutal Swing easily knocks out the Turtonator, but all that does is allow me to overfarm with my Zoroark. Zoroark will get to the foul play. It picks up the knockout. Back in comes the Bronzong, but Bronzong will also be outpaced, and foul play from this range will be enough to knock out the Bronzong, and we are able to take that win. Into the next match, we've got Glalie into Gyarados yet again. So once again, just going to play out this lead matchup. I played out this lead matchup a couple different ways. Sometimes I shielded, sometimes I didn't, knowing that I could survive a charge move. I believe this is one of the times I no shielded. So let's see how this plays out and if it's any different. They end up full setting the crunch. I end up under tapping the Avalanche. Avalanche will do massive neutral damage and pick up the knockout on the Gyarados unless they commit the shield. They end up letting me get to a second Avalanche, and Avalanche probably will be grabbing 2 shields from my opponent. And now we have a 2 shield advantage, so now in comes HISUIAN Zoroark. Zoroark will look for the full Shadow Claw farm down. I will have to put up a shield here. They full send the crunch, and now in the back is a Turtonator. Turtonator will look to connect with a Brutal Swing, but I end up firing off a charge move 1 Shadow Claw too early. Had I thrown 1 more, it would have been on the same tie, but the opponent ends up over farming. They come back in with the Gyarados. They get the Dragon Breath farm down, but that is okay. In comes the Glalie just to force their energy. They will pick up the knockout with an Aqua Tail here, but that is okay because all that does is set up a Ember farm down for the Turtonator. We get 2 Embers worth of energy, and what's in the back? It's another Oranguru. So Oranguru will be met with a Brutal Swing. This is super effective damage, but it looks like the opponent can hang on to 2 here. However, I have such a pacing advantage, and I have a shield advantage in this matchup, so the opponent has nowhere to run. 2 Brutal Swings, not enough to knock out, but I'm already at a 3rd Brutal Swing before the opponent can even get to a 3rd charge move. So down goes the Oranguru, and we are able to take that win. Into next match, we've got Glalie into an Oranguru on the lead this time. So this is a pretty neutral matchup as we both hit for entirely neutral damage across the board. Of course, you will be just going for Avalanches in this matchup as opposed to Shadow Ball, which would be single resisted because it's super effective on Psychic but double resisted on normal, which nets a single resistance. That said, I'm able to connect with an Avalanche on good timing. The opponent goes for a Trailblaze to boost their confusions, but now here comes Avalanche number 2. And if the opponent commits a shield, they can potentially look for a full confusion farm down, but I have the rank 4 Glalie. We hang on with 1 HP, making it to another Avalanche. Avalanche grabs 2 shields from my opponent, and now in comes Oranguru to absorb this energy. I was kind of hoping they'd go for a blind Trailblaze, throwing a double resisted charge move, but they do not. They hold on to their energy. They go for back-to-back Brutal Swings, but that's okay because we are saving shields for the HISUIAN Zoroark. I now will connect with a Brutal Swing. I don't really want to take that extra confusion because I don't yet know what is in the back, and in the back my opponent has a Gyarados, so I made a fantastic decision. In comes Zoroark. Zoroark will be hit with an Aqua Tail here, but I will just put up the shield and then look to overfarm and pick up the knockout with a Foul Play. Foul Play will actually get caught onto a Dugong in the back, so very nice catch for my opponent. However, it is too little too late as we have too much energy on the Turtonator, and that Gyarados is in Brutal Swing range. So now I can look to pick up the knockout with a Shadow Ball on the Dugong. Down goes the Dugong, and the opponent has to make it to either back-to-back charge moves or get the farm down before they make it to the Brutal Swing, and that's just not going to happen. The pacing on Turtonator is absolutely unreal. Brutal Swing picks up the knockout on the Gyarados, and we are able to take that win for the 5-0 set. So yeah, that is HISUIAN ZOROARK in the 2025 LAIC Championship Series Cup. This Pokemon was so safe. When I tell you this Pokemon feels like it has 0 bad matchups, I mean it. And there were a couple matchups where I actually cut out, and I think you'll see in tomorrow's video, I'm basically going to be running the exact same team, just highlighting Ember Turtonator instead. But there are so many Dusk Noirs floating around, and Dusk Noir is completely walled by Zoroark is typing because it's normal ghost. So it double resists normal, and it double resists fighting, and it double resists ghost individually on the 2 typings. But then because it's super effective on the other, Dynamic Punch is super effective on normal, whereas Shadow Punch is super effective on ghost, it actually becomes a single net resistance on both of them, which is really cool. It's a very unique typing. Of course, HISUIAN ZOROARK is insanely bulky, so you still have to commit shields in that matchup, but you can just look for a full Shadow Claw farm down because Astonishes don't really add up all that much. That said, I do want to say thank you to the expert trainer members on this channel: Benny Hemlock, Dr. Green Mustache, Eliana, Perry G, Blue Nation, Peter Rushworth, Chompus Clips, Sons of Code, Sohan Batil, and Immortal God, as well as an extra special thank you to the legend trainer members on this channel: Andrew Pitton, Boostachu, Speedster, Estros, Faceted Boss, CD Slaskus, and Star Bonsai. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, peace!